Back to room 303 in sophomore English. We continue now in our Unit 4 study of poetics, and we are into the poetry collection number 4. I'm with you now on page 685, The Waking by Theodore Roethke. This is another Viliani, so let's pause for a moment. Let's go back to page 672. And just be reminded, when we studied Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, we played the same game. Again, the Villanali is a 19-line form poem with a pattern of repeated lines and specific rhyme scheme. The lines of the Villanali are grouped into 5 3-line stanzas, and of course 1 4-line stanza again. Line 1 is repeated in lines 6, 12, 18. Line 3 is repeated in lines 9, 15, and 19. So, as we pointed out already, this kind of effect can be powerful, and we'll see this game getting played again with Roethke. Let's mention Roethke on 683. Born, notice your dates, 1908 to 1963. Born in Michigan, Roethke developed his great love of nature from observing the plants in his family's commercial greenhouses. This love is often reflected in his poetry. In 1954, Roethke received the Pulitzer Prize for his poetry. Let's turn now to page 685. And already you can see the Villanali there that we're working with. Notice you got your 19 lines. Notice we'll have repetition of certain lines. The title of the poem is The Waking. Let's start at level 1 by just making a quick observation. We can have 2 kinds of waking up. We can have what you do in the morning, or we hope that you do in the morning, to arrive at school on time. Physical waking up. We can also have another kind of waking up. So we're going to pay attention to how waking up is symbolic in this poem. Let's now just pay attention to the poem itself, read along, and then we'll go to work with it.
The Waking by Theodore Roethke. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. We think by feeling. What is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Of those so close beside me, which are you? God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. Light takes the tree, but who can tell us how? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Great nature has another thing to do to you and me. So take the lively air and, lovely, learn by going where to go. This shaking keeps me steady. I should know. What falls away is always, and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go.
Now, the tone, no doubt, of this poem is different from the Dylan Thomas passage, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night. Notice it's not as sober, it's not as heavy, it's not as serious. This poem, a little bit more playful, we might say. Let's go through this poem now at level 1 and just make sure that we understand what is being said. Notice, I wake to sleep. Now there's 2 ways to read this line. One is, I wake from sleep. I'm sleeping down the way. Or, I wake up knowing that sooner or later I have to go back to sleep. That is to say, the cycles. Let's write that down already in 2A as one of the major messages of this poem. The notion that life is divided up into these cycles of waking and sleeping, okay? I take my waking slow. Jot down at level 1, what do you think that means? Fundamentally at 3B, there's 2 kinds of readers of this poem. One, those of us who wake up in the morning, and the minute we wake up, bing, we're ready to go. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I got work to do. There's another kind of us, the snooze hitters, who are not interested in waking up at all. So when the alarm goes off or somebody tells us it's time to get up, we roll over, we go back to sleep. Our waking up is a slow process. What do you think this means, I take my waking slow? Do you read this as, I am not one of those people that likes to get up really fast and go at it? Look at the next line. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. That is to say, this notion of looking forward to something, right? And then, of course, the repeated line, I learn by going where I have to go. Jot down that line and jot down at level 1 what you think that means. I learn by going where I have to go. Some students have pointed out that what this really means is I learn by experience, hands-on. I have to go through an experience to learn from that experience. Don't tell me about it. I mean, you can warn me if you want to, but in the end, I got to do what I got to do. In other words, learning is always about somehow experiential. We're going to come back to this one. Let's write this down then at 2A. Learning equals waking. I would write that formula down and look at it. Learning equals waking. When you learn something new, it's kind of like a waking up, if you will. We think by feeling. What is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. And then I wake to sleep and take my waking slow, back to the opening line. We think by feeling. This notion that there's, this question, which is more important in a decision, the head or the heart? In other words, when you have to make a really major decision, do you go by the rational side of you, your head, your think, or do you maybe go more by your emotions? Here in a few months, when you are a junior getting ready to be a senior, you'll start the process of college visits. And there will always be this debate about what's the best place to go to college. Some students will make that decision, of my seniors, by making all of the rational they make all this stuff, they make all these expectations of questions and everything, and they put it all on paper. Other students, they show up, it's all a matter of emotion for them, feeling, right? Notice the third stanza, of those so close beside me, which are you? Notice now, you're invited into the poem. God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. The relationship between nature and learning. Let's write that one down. The relationship between nature and learning. Light takes the tree, but who can tell us how? Put it in your notes. We said this, that Roethke is very influenced by the fact he grew up in a greenhouse. So photosynthesis, he wrote a number of poems about it. Here, notice it. We know it's important. We know that if Ruthie's tree didn't engage in it, we would all die because we have oxygen. And yet, how does photosynthesis actually work? Well, you can explain to us the fundamental kind of way that it happens, but you still can't explain why it happens. Notice he says, I have no idea. Who can tell us how? In other words, learning is about excitement, new ideas, right? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. One of the ways that trees die, of course, is the worm. In other words, the relationship between life and death, right? I wake to sleep and take my waking slow, back to the line. Great nature, did you notice it's capitalized? Great nature has another thing to do to you and me. So take the lively air and lovely learn by going where to go. In other words, you live for a while and then nature's got to help us go through that process of dying. This shaking keeps me steady. This shaking. What is shaking here that you can imagine? Maybe the wind through the leaves of the branches of a tree. This shaking could be the fear of the second line that can't be feared. This understanding, learning is like a shaking. It's like a change in you in some fundamental way. And what falls away is always. In other words, there's always the future. It's always coming. We're in the present, but there's this thing of the future that's always coming. It's also near. Life and death, both are always near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. Let's now work at 2A really quickly. What is this poem's message, primary message? Of course, it's all about waking up. It's all about learning as a kind of waking up. We have a tendency to, in our sophomore year, slide into a certain kind of mind-numbing toleration of the experience. And the challenge for us, of course, is daily to wake up to new ideas. Of course, we've said it at 2B. We, again, are looking at this poetic form, right, of the Villanali. And the reality is that this is one of those things where we try and get an appreciation of this poetic form by studying a couple of these, the Dylan Thomas Ruff offering as well as now the Roethke offering as well. At 3A, I want us to think a little bit about a number of titles. You'll remember in our study of Psalm of Life, that notion of trust no future, how e'er pleasant, let the dead past bury the dead, act in the living present, heart within and God our head. This idea that the only thing you'll ever actually have is the present moment. In your junior year, this is what I want you to write down at 3A. In your junior year, you're going to stumble onto a great American writer and thinker, Henry David Thoreau, who told about an experience that he had when he went off to live by himself in the woods next to a pond named Walden. In one of the most important passages from Walden, Thoreau says it this way: "We must awaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn that does not forsake us in our soundest sleep." And then he goes on to say, "I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable truth that one can, in fact, make one's life better by a conscious endeavor." Now, this idea of waking up is a very old one. It is central to all spiritual teachings, right? This need to awaken, to figure it out, to come to some realization. When we study in our senior year, put this at 3A as well, when we study our Joyce, James Joyce, he'll call it an epiphany, an insight, a realization. Finally, at 3B, what kind of waker are you? Two-part question here. In the morning when you wake up, are you, let's go, let's get up, let's get going? Or are you one of those, let's hit the snooze button and go back to sleep and have somebody make us get out of bed? This poem seems to suggest the way you wake up in the morning is the way you live the rest of your day. You may want to challenge yourself to start to think about getting up in the morning alive, awake, ready to go, instead of kind of slumbering. I have sophomores that say, "Dude, I am not 100% until sometime, north of 10:30, and it takes me that long to wake up." It may be that you want to challenge yourself, as the Roethke poem suggests, to see learning as waking up. To what degree do you feel like you are awake? What's the most important thing you think you've ever learned that woke you up? Is there a text, 3A again, is there a text that tells you it's time to wake up? Let's go, let's go. It's your life. It's your life. It's your opportunity. Let's go to work with it. Well, there you go. An introduction to Roethke's poem. I hope maybe the poem helps you to awaken, as Thoreau suggested as well. Thank you.